Long-haul truckers spend their lives on the road, driving through the night while the rest of the world sleeps. They see things on those dark highways that most people never encounter. Things that happen in the empty spaces between cities, on stretches of road where civilization feels like a distant memory. And sometimes they encounter something that makes them question whether they should ever drive at night again. What you're about to hear are 3 documented accounts from professional truck drivers who experienced something on the road that defied explanation. These stories have been verified through CB radio logs, truck stop surveillance footage, and police reports. They're real. They happened. And they're still happening to drivers out there right now. The first story comes from a driver named James Mitchell, who's been hauling freight across the Midwest for 18 years. James is the kind of driver other truckers respect. Professional, reliable, not prone to exaggeration or tall tales. Which is why, when he reported what happened to him on Interstate 80 in Nebraska in October 2019, people listened. James was making a late-night run from Omaha to Cheyenne, driving a route he'd driven hundreds of times before. It was 2:30 in the morning, and the highway was empty. Not another vehicle in sight. Just darkness, his headlights cutting through it, and the endless white lines of the interstate stretching ahead. James was about 40 miles outside of North Platte when he noticed something in his side mirror. Headlights, coming up fast behind him. Way too fast. He checked his speedometer. He was doing 65, the speed limit for trucks. But these lights were closing the distance rapidly. Had to be doing over 100 miles per hour. James moved to the right lane to let them pass. But the vehicle didn't pass. It pulled up directly behind his trailer and matched his speed. Close. Dangerously close. James could see in his mirrors it was a pickup truck, dark-colored. But he couldn't make out any other details because the truck's high beams were on, blinding him through his mirrors. He tried speeding up. The truck stayed right on him. He slowed down. The truck slowed down, maintaining that same dangerous distance, maybe 10 feet off his rear bumper. This went on for 15 minutes. James tried the CB radio, asked if any other truckers were in the area, if anyone could see what was happening. No response. The highway remained empty except for him and this truck that wouldn't pass and wouldn't back off. James decided to pull over at the next rest stop, let this psycho go ahead. But when he put on his turn signal, the truck behind him flashed its lights. Not just once, repeatedly. On and off, like it was sending a message or a warning. James's hands tightened on the wheel. Something about this felt wrong, really wrong. He decided not to pull over. He'd keep driving. Eventually this truck would have to stop for gas or give up. Then James saw something that made his blood run cold. In the brief moments when the truck's high beams would dip, in those split seconds of normal lighting, he could see into the truck's cab. And there was no one driving it. The driver's seat was empty. The truck was following him, matching his speed, flashing its lights, but there was nobody behind the wheel. James blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, looked again, still empty. He grabbed his CB radio with shaking hands and called for help, described his location, described what was happening, pleaded for anyone who could hear him to call the police. A voice crackled back. Another trucker, a woman named Sarah, said she was 20 miles ahead and she'd call 911. She told James to stay calm and keep driving. James drove. The phantom truck stayed on him, never backing off, never pulling alongside, just following with its high beams and its empty driver's seat. Then, as James approached the North Platte exit, something changed. The truck started falling back, slowly, dropping distance. James watched in his mirrors as it fell farther and farther behind, until finally it took an exit, just pulled off the highway like a normal vehicle. James was shaking so badly he had to pull over. He sat in his cab at a rest stop, waiting for the state police to arrive. When they did, he told them everything. They were skeptical, but professional. They checked the area, reviewed what little traffic camera footage existed for that stretch of highway, and they found something. The cameras showed James's truck driving along the interstate, and they showed the pickup truck following him. But the cameras also showed what James couldn't see from his cab. The pickup truck wasn't empty. There was something in the driver's seat, but it wasn't human. The footage was grainy, shot from a distance, but the police enhanced it as much as they could. What they found made them seal the footage and classify it in a way that James has never been able to access. But one of the officers, a young trooper named Derek Mills, told James what he saw. He said the figure in the truck was tall, too tall to be sitting comfortably in a normal pickup. It was hunched forward, its head nearly touching the roof of the cab, and its arms, what you could see of them, were wrong, too long, reaching from the steering wheel down to where the pedals would be, without the elbows bending right. Officer Mills told James that every few years they get reports like this. A truck or car following someone on this stretch of I-80, behaving strangely, and when people get a good look at the driver, they see either nothing or something that isn't quite human. The folklore among Nebraska state troopers is that something prowls this section of highway, something that drives a vehicle it doesn't need because it's mimicking human behavior, something looking for prey or testing targets. Most of the time it just follows for a while and then breaks off. But there have been disappearances, truckers who called in strange encounters and then went silent, found days later their trucks pulled off on remote side roads, empty. No signs of struggle, no indication of where the drivers went, just empty cabs and the lingering feeling that something took them. James Mitchell still drives truck, but he won't take loads that route him through that section of I-80 at night. He plans his trips to avoid it, and he tells other truckers to do the same, because he knows what he saw in those mirrors. He knows that for over 15 minutes, something that wasn't human followed him down a dark highway, matching his every move, studying him, and he knows he was lucky. Lucky that it decided to let him go. Lucky that he didn't pull over when it flashed its lights, because James is convinced that's what it wanted. It wanted him to stop, to get out of his cab, to be alone on the side of a dark highway with whatever was in that truck, and he's certain that if he'd stopped, he would have become another missing driver, another unsolved case, another name added to the list of people who disappeared on I-80 and were never seen again. The second story is somehow even more disturbing because it involves multiple witnesses and happened in a populated area. In March 2021, a trucker named Angela Reeves was making a delivery to a warehouse in Bakersfield, California. She'd driven through the night and arrived at the warehouse at 4 a.m. The facility didn't open until 6, so Angela pulled into the truck parking area to catch some sleep before unloading. The parking lot was large, probably space for 40 trucks, and there were about a dozen other semis already parked there. Angela found a spot in the middle of the lot, feeling safe with other drivers nearby. She locked her doors, reclined her seat, and closed her eyes. Angela woke suddenly at 4:45 a.m. to the sound of tapping on her window. Not knocking, tapping, light, rhythmic, tap, tap, tap. She sat up, disoriented, and looked at the window. There was a woman standing outside her truck. Young, maybe early 20s, wearing what looked like a nightgown. Her hair was wet, hanging in her face. Her feet were bare. She was standing there in the dark parking lot, tapping on Angela's window with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. Angela's first thought was that this woman needed help. She rolled down her window about 2 inches and asked what was wrong. The woman stopped tapping. She tilted her head to the side, an odd, bird-like movement. Then she smiled, and Angela saw that her teeth were wrong. Too many of them, crowded in her mouth, overlapping. The woman spoke in a voice that was too deep, too resonant for someone her size. "Let me in. It's cold out here. Let me in." Angela's instinct screamed at her that something was very wrong. She told the woman she couldn't help her, that she should go to the warehouse office. The woman's smile widened impossibly, her mouth stretching farther than it should. "Let me in," she repeated. "I know you're alone in there. I know you're vulnerable. Let me in." Angela rolled up her window quickly and locked it, though it had never been unlocked. Her hands were shaking. The woman pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging it, even though it wasn't that cold outside. "Let me in, Angela. Let me in, Angela. Let me in, Angela." She was saying Angela's name, but Angela hadn't told her what her name was. There was no name visible on her truck. No way this woman should know who she was. Angela grabbed her CB radio and called for help. She was terrified to find that the radio produced only static. No matter what channel she tried, just static. She switched to her cell phone. No signal. That shouldn't be possible. She'd had full bars when she'd parked. The woman outside continued to stare at her, pressed against the window, repeating her name over and over. "Angela, Angela, Angela." Then suddenly, the woman stepped back from the truck. She turned and started walking toward another semi parked 3 spaces away. Angela watched in horror as the woman approached the other truck and began tapping on its window. Tap, tap, tap. The driver's door of that truck opened. A man stepped out. Angela couldn't see his face clearly in the darkness, but she saw him look at the woman, saw them exchange words. Then the man followed the woman. They walked together toward the edge of the parking lot, toward a line of trees that bordered the property, and they disappeared into those trees. Angela sat frozen. Every instinct told her not to get out of her truck, but that driver had just walked off with that thing wearing a woman's face. She had to do something. She tried her CB radio again. This time it worked. She raised several nearby truckers, explained frantically what she'd just seen. Within minutes, 3 other drivers had gathered at her truck. She told them what happened, pointed toward the trees. One of the drivers, an older man named Frank, said he'd heard tapping on his window too, about 20 minutes earlier. But when he'd looked, no one was there. Another driver, a younger guy named Marcus, said his radio had gone to pure static for about 10 minutes and just now started working again. They called the police. When officers arrived, Angela showed them where the man and woman had gone into the trees. The police searched with flashlights. They found something almost immediately, a clearing about 50 yards into the tree line, and in that clearing they found the man's wallet and keys, his phone, his jacket, all in a neat pile, like he'd carefully placed them there. But no sign of the man himself. Police searched for hours as the sun came up, brought in dogs. The dogs tracked to the clearing and then lost the scent completely, like the man had simply vanished from that spot. They identified him from his wallet. Dale Freeman, 48 years old, veteran trucker. No history of mental illness or erratic behavior. No reason he would abandon his truck and possessions and walk into the woods. never to be seen again. Police reviewed the warehouse's security cameras. The footage showed Angela's truck, showed other trucks in the lot, but it didn't show the woman. Angela could be seen in her cab, clearly reacting to something outside her window. Rolling down the window, rolling it back up, looking distressed. But there was no woman visible on camera. Then the footage showed Dale Freeman's truck, showed his door opening, showed Dale stepping out and standing beside his truck. On camera, he appeared to be alone, but his body language suggested he was talking to someone, looking at someone. After a few minutes, Dale walked toward the tree line, walking steadily, purposefully, not running, not being chased, just walking into the trees as if he had a reason to go there. And then he was gone. The police had no explanation. They classified Dale as a missing person. His family was devastated, and Angela Reeves was traumatized because she knows what she saw. She saw a woman who tapped on her window with too many teeth and knowledge she shouldn't have. She saw that woman lead a man to his disappearance. And she knows, with absolute certainty, that if she'd opened her door, if she'd let that woman in, she would have been the one walking into those trees. She would have been the one who disappeared. Angela doesn't park in isolated lots anymore. Even with other trucks around, she doesn't feel safe. Because she learned that night that there are things out there that know how to look human enough to fool you, that know how to find you when you're alone, that whisper your name even though you never told them, and that lead people into darkness they never come back from. Angela did some research after that night, talked to other truckers, and she learned she's not the first to encounter the woman with wet hair. There are stories going back decades, different truck stops, different parking lots, but always the same description. Young woman, nightgown, wet hair, tapping on windows, calling drivers by names she shouldn't know. And in nearly every case, the trucker either escaped like Angela did, or they disappeared like Dale. There's even a name for her among some truckers. They call her the Wet Lady. And the veteran drivers, the ones who've been on the road for 30 or 40 years, they all have the same advice. If you ever hear tapping on your window in the middle of the night, don't look. Don't engage. Don't acknowledge. Just start your engine and drive away. Because if you see her, if you make eye contact with the Wet Lady, she'll know your name, and she'll keep finding you, truck stop after truck stop, until either you let her in or you stop driving at night forever. The third and final story is different from the first two because it doesn't involve a supernatural entity or a creature in disguise. It involves something potentially more terrifying. Human evil aided by impossible knowledge. In June 2022, a trucker named David Chen was hauling a load from Seattle to Minneapolis. He was on Highway 90, crossing through Montana in the dead of night. It was around 3 a.m., and David was fighting to stay alert. He'd been driving for 9 hours and was looking forward to reaching a truck stop in another hour to rest. That's when his CB radio crackled to life. A voice, male, calm and friendly. "Hey there, driver. You look tired. Why don't you pull over and rest? There's a scenic turnout coming up in about 2 miles on your right. Nice and quiet. You could catch a few hours of sleep." David was immediately suspicious. He could see on his GPS that there was indeed a turnout in 2 miles. But how did this person on the CB know David was tired? How did they know which direction he was traveling? David responded cautiously. "Thanks for the tip, but I'm good. I'll make it to the next truck stop." The voice came back. "Oh, come on, David. You're exhausted. Your eyes are heavy. You're rubbing your face to stay awake. You really should pull over before you have an accident." David's blood ran cold. The voice had used his name, and it had described exactly what he was doing. He just rubbed his face trying to wake himself up. But his truck had curtains on the sleeper cab. No one could see inside, and there were no other vehicles around him. He checked all his mirrors carefully. The highway was empty. David keyed his CB. "Who is this? How do you know my name?" The voice laughed, a sound that made David's skin crawl. "I know lots of things about you, David. I know you're hauling electronics from Seattle to a distributor in Minneapolis. I know you have a wife named Susan and 2 kids, Emily and Jake. I know you live at 4782 Maple Street in Portland. I know you're alone on this highway right now. And I know you're going to pull over at that turnout, because if you don't, I'm going to visit your house. I'm going to knock on your door while Susan and the kids are sleeping. And I'm going to do things to your family that will make you wish you just pulled over and talked to me." David's heart was pounding. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some trucker prank. This person had specific information about his family. David grabbed his cell phone to call 911. Before he could dial, the CB crackled again. "Don't call the police, David. I'm watching you. I see you reaching for your phone. Put it down. Take the turnout. Park your truck. And wait. I just want to talk. Do that, and your family stays safe. Refuse, and I make a phone call of my own, and people I know in Portland will be at your house in 20 minutes. David looked around frantically. No cars, no trucks. The highway was empty. Where was this person? How were they watching him? David made a split-second decision. He grabbed his phone and called Susan. It rang 4 times before she answered, groggy and confused. "David, it's 3 a.m. What's wrong?" David tried to keep short, his voice calm. "Susan, I need you to listen carefully. Take the kids and go to your mother's house right now. Don't ask questions. Just get everyone in the car and go. Lock all the doors. Call me when you're there." Susan's voice sharpened with fear. "What's happening? David, you're scaring me." David said, "Please, just trust me. Go now." He hung up, praying Susan would do as he asked. The CB voice was angry now. "That was a mistake, David. You should have cooperated. Now things get complicated." David floored the accelerator, pushing his truck as fast as he dared. He called 911 and reported everything. The dispatcher stayed on the line, said they were alerting Montana State Patrol and Portland Police. David gave them his exact location, his route, his family's address. All while the voice on the CB continued, "You can't outrun me, David. I'm always watching, always listening. You think you're safe in your truck? You think the police can help? I've done this 17 times. 17 drivers who thought they were smart, who thought they could refuse me. Do you want to know what happened to them?" David didn't respond. He just drove, knuckles white on the steering wheel, phone pressed to his ear, talking to the 911 dispatcher. After 20 agonizing minutes, his phone rang. Susan. She was at her mother's house. Everyone was safe. Portland police had sent a patrol car to watch the house. David felt some of the crushing weight lift from his chest. The voice on the CB had gone silent. David kept driving. A Montana State Patrol car caught up to him about 40 minutes later and escorted him to a truck stop. Police interviewed him for hours. They took his CB radio, checked his truck for tracking devices, examined his phone and computer. They found nothing. No bugs, no GPS trackers. No way anyone could have been monitoring him. But the police did take his report seriously, because David wasn't the first. Over the past 3 years, 12 other truckers had reported similar incidents on that stretch of highway. someone using a CB radio to contact them, someone who knew their names, knew details about their lives, claimed to be watching them, and tried to get them to pull over at remote locations. 2 of those truckers had complied, pulled over where they were told, and both had been found the next day, miles from their trucks, wandering in a dissociative state with no memory of what happened to them. One had been missing for 14 hours, the other for almost 2 days. Both showed signs of being drugged. Both had been robbed of their wallets and phones, but both felt certain that something else had happened to them, something they couldn't remember, something that left them with nightmares and an overwhelming fear of the dark. The FBI got involved. They believed this was a coordinated operation. Someone or multiple people who had access to commercial trucking databases, who could pull up driver information, delivery schedules, routes, who used that information to target drivers on isolated highways, who employed some kind of sophisticated surveillance technology to watch their targets in real time. The goal seemed to be kidnapping drivers for robbery, but investigators feared it might be worse than that. Some of the drivers who'd been contacted by the voice were never seen again, filed as missing persons. Their trucks found abandoned on remote access roads. No signs of struggle. No evidence of what happened. Just gone. David Chen provided as much information as he could. Voice recordings, exact times and locations, everything he remembered. But the investigation stalled. Whoever was behind this knew how to cover their tracks. They used encrypted CB channels, switched frequencies constantly, never stayed in one area long enough to be traced. The FBI warned commercial drivers to be vigilant, to report any suspicious CB contacts, to never, under any circumstances, pull over if instructed to do so by someone they don't know. But the contacts continue. Every few months, another trucker reports the same experience. A voice that knows too much, that can see them somehow, that tries to lure them to isolated locations with threats against their families. David still drives, but he's changed his routes. Won't take loads that go through Montana on Highway 90 at night. He keeps his CB radio on, but muted most of the time. And he's installed dashboard cameras that record constantly, storing footage to a cloud server. He figures if something happens to him, at least there will be evidence. At least his family will know what happened. But David knows he was lucky. Lucky that he didn't pull over. Lucky that Susan got out of the house. Lucky that whatever was watching him that night decided to let him go. And he thinks about the drivers who weren't lucky, the ones who pulled over, the ones who disappeared, the ones whose families are still waiting for them to come home. And he wonders how many more drivers will get the call, how many more will hear a voice that knows their name, knows their secrets, knows exactly how to exploit their fears, and how many will make the wrong choice and vanish into the night, becoming another mystery on America's dark highways. These are 3 true trucker horror stories, and if you're a commercial driver, if you spend your nights on lonely highways, moving freight while the rest of the world sleeps, remember these accounts. Remember that there are things out there on the road that aren't explained by logic or reason. Phantom vehicles driven by things that aren't human, entities that wear human faces but have too many teeth and know your name, and people, actual human predators, who have found ways to watch you that law enforcement can't trace. The highways at night are more dangerous than most people realize, not just because of tired drivers or poor visibility, but because the darkness between cities is where the unexplained thrives, where things that hunt can find isolated prey, where a trucker alone in a cab is vulnerable in ways that daylight never reveals. So if you're ever out there, driving through the 3 a.m. darkness, and something starts following too close, or someone taps on your window, or a voice on the CB knows things it shouldn't. Trust your instincts. Don't investigate. Don't engage. Don't pull over. Just keep driving. Get to the next populated area. Get around other people. Because the one thing all these stories have in common is that the predators, whether supernatural or human, they rely on isolation. They need you alone. They need you vulnerable. They need you to stop. And the moment you stop, the moment you give them access, you become another story that other drivers will tell. Another warning about what happens on the dark highways. Another name added to the list of people who encountered something they couldn't explain and didn't survive to tell about it.